So now what we're going to do is we're going to do two things in this video. We're going to cover some of the basic tags in HTML, and then we're going to discuss why that may not be the best way to go about using them in the way that I'm going to show them. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about tables and form fields. I think that's a good place to start. So to make a table, you have to make a table tag. That makes sense, right? And inside of the table tag, there's two parts to a table. There's the rows and the columns. And so you need to, using the tr tag, this creates a row. So you can go ahead and do this. This will make a 3-row table, but there aren't any columns yet. And to make a column, you use the TD, which is table data. And these are both. You can see when you click on one tag, it will give you the other tag that closes it, which is kind of handy. So go ahead and make some of these, and you can go ahead and add more columns. So this here will create a 2-column by 3-row table. So we can go ahead and do text here, and go ahead and, just to demonstrate that this works, we're going to put everything in here, and then we're going to save it. And then when we go over here to our website, you'll notice that there's something that you might not have expected, in that it didn't appear with physical borders on the table. It appeared as, it has 2 columns and 3 rows, but it doesn't show the border of the table. If you select everything, you'll notice that there are white lines there, but that's because there's an attribute we can use to make that happen. But in this browser it defaults to 0. You will, if you do want it 0, want to specify a border. By the way, we're using the border attribute. You would specify a border of 0, even if you wanted it to look like that. I recommend you do that, because some browsers and browser configurations can actually have a border by default on a table. So if we go ahead and put a border of 1 and save this and go back here, you'll notice that now we have a border here. So that's a good way to, that's basically all you need to know about tables. Anymore though, there's not too many uses for a table as far as layout is concerned. You used to basically have a big table in your website and you'd put everything in there accordingly. But refresh. That's not how it's recommended you do it anymore, and I'll explain that more in later. So one thing you can do with a table is that I recommend you do is, if you're going to make a form and you want everything to be lined up properly, that's how you should do it. So let's go ahead and make a form, and then this is a good place to introduce the form elements. So let's think about, say, a register form, and I'll try to include all of the input types. So say you're making a register area, a register form for your website. We're going to want your name. I'm not going to make these too complicated. We'll want your email, your password, we'll want you probably to confirm your password. I'm going to cheat and copy this down a bunch. We'll probably want to know, say, a username. We may want to know your age, and we may want to know about, I don't know, a brief description of you. And then we may want to know, and let me just type this out really quickly. we may want to know how you found the site. So, how did you find us? Question mark. And then one other thing we may want to know is, would you like to receive our newsletter? Question mark. So let me go ahead and remove all these text here's. Control F. Okay, so that was just a find and replace to get rid of those. So if we go ahead and save this and go back here, you'll notice that we have all of the fields one under the other like you'd expect, and if we highlight everything, you'll kind of see the grid that the table has made, and it is auto-expanded to include everything. So now what we need to do is put the input fields in. Okay, so now that we have all of this set up, let's go ahead and add our form fields. And the way you're going to do this, I'm going to go ahead and pull down a couple of lines just to demonstrate the fields, the tag. So this is going to have several attributes that we'll eventually be using. So go ahead and put the tag itself is going to be input for most of these. And then the type. For the name here, we need a type of text, because this is just going to be a simple text field. There's nothing too special about it. And if we just put this here like this and saved it, pretty much nothing would happen. It's unexpected. You'd get, a box that you can type in. Pretty simple. One thing you may want to do is an attribute you can use is, say, length. I think that's a tag, right? Max length, sorry. Max length, say you put 5 and you save this. This will mean that it has, unsurprisingly, a maximum length of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are better, more effective ways to do this, but this is just a simple, browser side check to limit the length of the field. Okay, so now one other thing you may want to know is width. Say we make the width 2 and save and refresh. Say we make the width, you actually have to give it a dimension, because you could use like inches or other things. Say we make the width 2 pixels, and apparently that doesn't work. So yeah, don't worry about that. I'll cover that soon. For the email, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. Let's go ahead and get rid of this max length thing. That was just a demonstration. By the way, to be a successful developer, there is no need for you to know everything about. You'll just need to know how every tag and attribute that the tag has. That helps, yes, to be able to just know it. But if you need to look something up occasionally to remember if it's, say, width or columns, which I always have to do with text areas, for example, that's not really a big deal, because as long as you know how to make it work, that's what's going to make you successful. So go ahead and copy this down, or type it out again. I recommend you type it out again if you're not familiar with it. So the type for an email, if you couldn't guess, is email. Now you may be wondering, why can't I just use a normal text field? And the reason is because a normal text field would work just fine, except that things like Google Chrome has an autofill thing, and if the type is email, it will only allow things of emails to be auto-filled in there, things like that. It just helps with general browser interactions and stuff with the website. So you can make it a text. I would just recommend making it an email form type. And then password. This is different than the other two because a password field, if you've ever logged into a website, you'll notice that you either get asterisks or bullets. So like when you're typing, you'll try to type your password and you'll either get that or you'll get these. And you know, that's what we want to make happen, because we don't want them to be able to see what the password is. So you can make the type password. Pretty simple. And then confirm password is going to be the exact same thing. By the way, I should probably mention that this form that we're making here isn't going to do anything just yet, because there's nowhere that it's actually going to go. We don't have a script written to process the data or do anything with the data, so we will be getting to that in a much later tutorial. So that's that. And then the username. By the way, you don't have to, I should probably mention this, but you don't have to be spacing yours out like I am. This is just for visibility. Also, HTML will not allow you, say I were to type this, and I do that, all of this would appear on one line. You need to actually tell it when to make a line break so that you're able to do things like this without having line breaks, because otherwise that would get kind of confusing. And a break tag simply looks like that. Once again, this / here is totally optional. That is acceptable, but I personally like it that way. So yeah, the username is going to be pretty much the same thing as some of the others. It's just text, age. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can just use the simple text field and then later check to be sure it's a number value, or you can give them a drop-down menu. And for teaching purposes, we're going to be using the drop-down menu. And in order to do that, you need to do a bit more markup than you've done previously, and you need to make a select tag. And inside of this tag, you need to put an option tag. And you can have as many of these as you want. We're just going to assume that their age is going to be, say, we'll give them an age range. So we'll say 10 to 20, or 10 to 19 rather, 20 to 29, 30 to 39. So what this is going to do is it's going to generate a drop-down list with 3 options. The first option will be the default option. Okay, so biography, this is just, so that we can include all of the field types. How did you find us? So the next thing is going to be the biography type, and of course we don't want them to be limited to one line, so we're actually going to use a text area tag. And this is not a short tag like you might think, because inside of here, in between the tags, you're able to actually put data and have it be in the text area. There's ways to do that with the single line text boxes, but so the text area has a couple of parameters you may want to know. It has a calls parameter, attribute, and a rows attribute, and this is just going to be the number of columns that you allow. Say 35 is a good number, and rows, say 4. This will give them a 35 wide by 4 high text area. And then how did you find us? That's a good option to introduce the radio button, which are the little circular things, not a checkbox. And those are going to be, they're going to be using the input tag as well. So input, and then the type equals radio. So what you're also going to want to do is you're going to actually add some text next to the radio button, so that there's more than just a button, because that does nothing. I mean, the user doesn't know what the button is for. So how did you find us? Let's say Google, Facebook, what's another search engine? Yahoo. I was going to use Bing, but who uses Bing? So one thing that you're also going to want to do is you do need to put a line break here, because this is all in one box and we want them to appear on different lines. You don't want them to say that, we don't want it to look something like this. We want it to actually go down to another line and appear like that, where the bullets, of course, are radio buttons. So that's why we're going to be adding breaks there. And I'm going to cheat and copy and paste it, because that's easier. And then, of course, the last thing, I may be forgetting something, but I will cover that if I'm not. I will cover that if I am. So the next thing is going to be quite similar. Actually, this is how I'm going to do this part. So the would you like to receive a newsletter, that the checkbox is actually going to go right next to that question. It's not actually going to go on the right like the last things have been. So to make that, you just put a type of checkbox, and we're actually going to move this to the same column or data row, cell, as that. Also, if you'll notice when I zoom in here, I've got word wrap on, so everything goes down to the next line and it doesn't scroll to the right. I find that to be helpful. You don't have to do it, but if you want it, you can simply go up to the View tab up here and select word wrap. For example, if I didn't have it on, I would have to be scrolling left and right to keep up with things, and I don't like that. So we're actually going to get rid of this whole setup, and the reason we still need to have this empty TD tags here is because otherwise it would spread it out so that it's only one column wide, because we haven't specified that there's two columns inside of the row, and I'll explain that later. So would you like to receive the our newsletter? So that's pretty much all that I think we need to cover for forms and tables. So let's go ahead and save this and check to be sure it worked here. So if we refresh the page, we have an extra input field up at the top for no reason. Oops. Why is that? Something's off. So let me just troubleshoot here. Okay, so the thing down here, I forgot to put this thing in between the tags that it needed to be between. It was just sitting out in the open outside of the thing, and that will mess things up. So be sure that it's inside of the TD tag and not in between the TR tags, which is what I had. So if I save this and I refresh here, everything's aligned correctly. We have a text field here, an email field here, a password field here, a confirm password field, a text field here, and then we have our drop-down menu. We have our biography, which is just an expandable text area. Also, later we'll be covering how to make this text look like this text, because that font is really bad. And we have our how did you find us thing. We'll also talk about how we're going to make it so that doesn't allow you to check more than one of those, and so that it has one by default if you would like. And how did you receive our newsletter? That is a checkbox. And oh, I forgot the submit button. So to add a submit button, we're going to create another table row, and we're going to need this empty table data cell here, so that it moves it to the left side, if that makes it. It moves it to the right, I'm sorry, the submit button, so that it's aligned correctly with the rest of the form. This is just a formatting thing. So inside of this second TD pair of tags, you're going to once again make an input tag with a type of submit. So let's go ahead and save this and see what happens. So the submit button doesn't really do anything right now. The form doesn't go anywhere. We'll be covering that later, of course. But it says submit. We may not want it to say submit, and you can't just you can't just put it under the type there. So if we save that and refresh, it'll default to a text area because you entered an invalid type. So what you actually need to do is set this to submit, and use another thing called value, another attribute called value, and this will allow you to set the name of it. So save this and refresh here, and then you'll have a register button there. Also, you may want to head this thing, so this is a good time to introduce the header tags, which are tags that are either H1, and this one can be 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. H1 is of course the biggest, so if we put that, we're going to get a large size title up there. If we made this, say, put a subtitle down here, I don't know. I'm just making this up as I go along. But you can just put a subtitle there, etc. This is just to introduce the tags, of course. And that's pretty much all you need to know for this section. You can create a reasonably ugly site here, using what you've just learned. But you should by now have a grasp of the principles. In the next video, we're going to introduce a new language called CSS, and then we'll actually get to style things and make it look better than it does now. So I will see you then.